Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam. Listen, reflect and absorb. Dear listeners, Sai Ram and welcome to our radio series in which a divine discourse by Bhagavan is played in small parts, and following each part a short discussion is undertaken to reflect on the message. This is a part of Radio Sai's Thursday Live, hosted by Sai Prakash and Prem every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. only on Asia's stream of Radio Sai Global Harmony. In today's episode, which was first broadcast live on 29th May 2014, Mr. Sunam Gamtso, an alumnus of Bhagwan's University, participated as a guest. The discourses undertaken for study in this program are from the series of discourses delivered as part of the summer course in Indian Culture and Spirituality, 1990. The clips played today are from the discourse delivered on 1st June, 1990.
Welcome, dear listeners, to this week's episode of Shravanam Mananam Nididhyasanam. As always, this is Prem from Team Radio Sai, beginning by offering a humble pranams at Bhagwan's lotus feet. With me, as always, I have Brother Sai Prakash to co-host the show for you. And like we had the previous week, we still have the company of Brother Sonam, an alumnus of Bhagwan's University, a very well-known composer and singer of bhajans. And on behalf of all of you, I'll welcome him once again to our show. Sai Ram, sir.
Sai Ram.
Sai Ram, Sai Prakash.
Sai Ram, Prem. Actually, more than just a composer and singer of bhajans, he's a good musician. I would say that's what defines him in a nutshell. Because even the Bridge Across Time series that the alumni have brought out, I think Sir has been involved in the composing of the music right from the beginning.
Even as you're saying that Sir is a good musician, in Discourse, I think sometime in the early 80s, Swami gave the importance of Sai bhajans, or bhajans as it is sung in Swami's presence.
Okay.
And how it's more special than to be a bhajan singer and composer than to be a musician. Because Swami says in that, there are so many types of singing. Swami says, even in devotional singing, Swami says there is Nama Sankirtana, there is Guna Sankirtana, and Bhava Sankirtana.
Jana Sankirtana.
Yeah, Sankirtana itself, Jana Sankirtana. Swami said that you sing in a group. Swami said, and gave various examples. He said Bhava Sankirtana, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Nama Sankirtana is, I think, Tyagaraja. I think Tyagaraja is Guna Sankirtana. And Swami gave so many such examples. And then Swami said, you're all so fortunate because you're able to do all this by participating in bhajans.
And in the immediate presence of the Master, the Lord Himself.
In the very presence of Swami.
Yeah.
Nothing could be better, and in that way, all of us are very fortunate, and sir, you're a little more fortunate than us.
No. This is the most miraculous thing. The manner in which, Swami shapes us, like a sculptor, master sculptor, he really molds us into something that we would have never earlier even thought of. Like, I could have never imagined myself sitting and composing bhajans, but then the fact of the matter is that I never composed any bhajans. I just received the bhajans. Like any of the other bhajan composers, they have all received the bhajans from Bhagwan in all humility and joy. And the only privilege is that we are the first recipients.
Correct.
Very true. So with that interesting intro, let us go into this little discourse. Interestingly, the discourse, the 14th discourse in that series called Practice and Precept.
Yes.
Till now, whatever Swami has spoken, if we just go through what the few clips we have played, whatever Swami has spoken is about, where Swami is talking about having that eye of wisdom. Swami gave the example of the musk deer, which does not know that the fragrance is within and such is outside. I wonder how much of practice is involved in the recognition of any of these things which Swami has told. I mean, most of these things are beyond a person's ability to do something and get to that.
Correct.
Isn't it?
Correct.
Going back to that discourse that Swami gave a few weeks back when we went through, Swami said just stop doing everything. Stop doing sadhana.
Correct.
You cannot do anything to achieve this. Interesting where Swami is going to bring the concept of practice and precept.
No, but there is one point Swami makes here which is very interesting. He says, according to the Vedas, he says, na karmana na prajayanena na tyagena ke. So he says, only by renunciation you can achieve, you can get immortality.
Yes.
And then he goes on to explain. He says, in this very discourse, he says, what is renunciation? It's not running away from your family, nor giving up your wife and children and going somewhere else and you say, I've renounced the world. It's not that. He says, it stems from the main cause for this delusion is your identification with the body.
With the body.
Very clearly he says.
Dhyanubhuti.
Then he says nothing else will make you realize this. Only thing you have to do is say, I am not the body, I am not the senses, the mind, the intellect. All these are my instruments. It looks like, this is the only practical thing, in the sense, something that we may have to do. We are already embodiments of divinity, but to remove this covering of Maya that is there, you have to reassert yourself. I think that's the practice part of it.
So many times, Swami would illustrate this with beautiful examples and even for the children. And then it would apply to even an elderly person, to anybody of any age.
Correct.
Like, am I this body? These are the litmus tests, How do you really come to the conclusion that you are not this body? So am I this body? My head, my body, my clothes. So in the same strain, you also say that my body. Just like the way you say, my shirt.
Correct.
And then ultimately, if it is your shirt, my shirt, then are you the shirt?
Exactly.
Then are you the body in the same strain? Then you are the possessor of the body. You are the master, the possessor of this body. The same way you are the possessor, the master, the owner of your shirt.
Correct.
So beautifully, and makes it so graphic and makes it so,
in fact,
easy for people.
He gives many examples to explain. He says it's like the cloud that blocks the light of the sun.
Yeah.
The cloud which comes out because of the sun's rays only.
Sun, right.
Then he gives another example of how the cataract born from the eye blurs the vision. But very beautifully, the modern Kali Yuga avatar that Swami is, in one of the discourses, as he was telling this, he was talking about Shravan Kumar, who was looking after his parents.
Yeah.
He says they were old people and they could not see. And in those days, they didn't have cataract operations. He says, nowadays you have cataract operation. Poor thing, at that time they didn't have cataract operation, so he had to carry them.
No netralaya.
So he explains that it is like cataract, and the cataract that is born from the eye has to be removed. That itself comes and blurs.
I think that's the most interesting thing of the way Swami would explain. Once I remember one of our lecturers were explaining that Swami started telling one Chinnakatha, and later a student came and told this sir about. That's a Chinnakatha which Swami has narrated over and over again, so many times. So this boy who was listening to it, he said, oh, this Chinnakatha, I've heard it. And he said, Swami narrated the entire Chinnakatha, and the last line, he twisted the moral of the story so completely.
Give a new dimension.
Give an absolutely new dimension. That was a surprise element in the way Swami would explain.
That's true.
A bit of humor would be there, a bit of twist in the tale itself, sometimes.
I mean, to what extent to explain Advaita, to talk about cataract. I think just before we started the session, you were sharing a very beautiful incident, just a reflection of one of those days when you came early to the mandir. Can you please repeat it?
Yeah, this was way back in 1984.
Okay.
That day we just felt like going to the mandir a little bit early. And some of the seniors and bhajan boys, we had the privilege to do that.
Okay.
So we were right there in the mandir, just a few of us. And then that day, by our really great good fortune, Swami just came out very early. And then instead of going out and giving darshan, straight away he came inside the bhajan, inside the mandir. And then he spent a good almost, 45 minutes to 50 minutes with us, sitting on that pedestal on which the throne is kept,
Correct. Right next to the
tiger head.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Swami was sitting there. And then what was, seemingly small pep talks, like, but he started with Wordsworth that day.
Okay.
The Swami said, Wordsworth, a great poet.
Okay.
Then we said Swami William Wordsworth. Like I was so jubilant, because I knew about William Wordsworth, and because my mother had really drilled into my system all these great luminaries, these great poets. And I almost could, remember most of the wonderful poetry, most of the poems that they had written. So Swami said, can any one of you recite? Before that, Swami said, Wordsworth was a pure Advaitin, Swami said.
My God. William Wordsworth was an Advaitin. Okay.
The moment he said that, he also said at the end of it, which I might forget to add later on, Swami said, see, William Wordsworth never had the fortune to live with an avatar. You have the fortune to live with the avatar, and still, where is your realization?
My God.
Then Swami said, can any one of you recite one of the poems written by Wordsworth? I knew the daffodils. So I said, Swami, daffodils, I know daffodils. Bolo. Then I said, Swami, I just little bit of it. It starts so beautifully. I wandered lonely as a cloud that soars on high over vales and hills. And all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. So the whole imagery is so beautiful that the poet was just romping about in nature early in the morning. All of a sudden, he saw a host of golden daffodils. Then Swami stopped there and said, those flowers, they are very short-lived. It blossoms in the morning and withers away in the evening.
Okay.
By evening, it's not there. Then next morning, there are again another host of flowers, So that is all creation, preservation and dissolution going on in one day, in a trice. And then Swami said, now you tell the poem, and I continued telling the poem. Like besides the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze, a poet couldn't but be gay in such a jocund company, and all that I said. And the last part, the most beautiful, the punchlines, are, and oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon the inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. Now this beautiful poem, I knew the literary meaning of it, and so many times I had even, scored very good marks. But the spiritual significance of that poem, for the first time in my life, I heard from Bhagwan. Swami just point blank asked me, what is the mind's eye? That inward eye, Swami said, mind's eye. What is the mind's eye? Bolo. Then Swami said, what is the mood? That pensive mood. So Swami was telling, what is the mood? So I said, Swami, it's the meditative mood when we sit alone. Swami said, that is the mood when you drive away the whole world away, and then you are all alone. So that is the pensive mood. That is the mood, Swami said. So in that mood, what happens is, all that you see, all that you have experienced, they start flashing. You start seeing it, perceiving it with a mind's eye. And then you become one with the joy. Because you would have experienced so much of joy at a gross level. Then he, so beautifully he said, वो दूसरा पहले वाला जो था, वो भूताकाश है. ये चित्ताकाश है, वो चिदाकाश है. Swami said this. Bhutakash, Chittakash, Chidakash. So mind's eye is the Chittakash. Then Swami said, at that level, at the subconscious level, because you have traveled from the gross to the subtle, so you become very powerful, expansive, your imaginations can go beyond the horizon. Ananta hota hai, Swami said. Ananta hota hai. Then once you transcend even that, and go to the Chidakash, then you are infinity. And that is the Advaitic point. That is what Wordsworth was telling. Swami said, I am actually, for real, paucity of time, I am just narrating it this much only. But, this was the essence of what Swami said. And another thing is so thrilling, it becomes so difficult. Sometimes you get almost emotional, your hair stand on end when you even think of those wonderful moments. When Swami was so beautifully, and in such simple words, simple manner, he was making us understand the philosophy of Advaita through a poem written by an Englishman.
Amazing.
At some point of time.
I think that was one of the things which Swami did. Here Swami was telling about Jnana Chakshu. That perspective which Swami gave to look for this in whatever you do and whatever you see, whatever you learn. I think that was one of the greatest boons Swami gave. I remember Gangadhar Shastri sir telling, when he was taking a class in Ishrama school, those are the days when Swami would walk into any of the classes, and one day Swami walked into his class and Swami asked, "Teacher, what are you teaching?" And he said, "Swami, I'm teaching about liberty." He was a political science teacher, right? He said, "Swami, liberty." Swami said, "Very good. But even as you teach liberty, once in a while even teach about liberation."
So beautiful, so profound.
That is the beauty of the way Swami was constantly telling, do whatever you're doing, but keep your mind always on that, in the search for that. Never lose sight of that. Going back to the discourse, and I think towards the end, Swami was very referring to what Sir was explaining so beautifully, that moment. Swami is talking about Advaitanandam.
Advaitanandam.
What a beautiful word that Swami uses. Nityanandam, Brahmanandam, Advaitanandam, Swami says.
Swami gives those examples of the musk deer and of the elephant not knowing its own strength, but is being controlled by the small rod of the mahut. And then he tells about the musk deer which has the fragrance coming from within itself. So those are examples Swami gives and says, you are verily the Atman, your nature is Atma, and you are just covering it up with this Maya called creation. I think somewhere earlier Swami mentioned that you should give up the doership. That was one point which Swami brought out.
Swami spoke about how you gradually give up body consciousness, and through that you attain attachment towards God.
Correct.
Those 4 steps Swami said.
Yeah.
Deha Virakti with Daiva Asakti gives you Bandha Vimochana and Moksha Prapti.
Correct.
So beautifully Swami said. Swami said it's a process which happens simultaneously. Even as you give up body consciousness, you get more and more attached to God. In fact, in another discourse, Swami says the only attachment worth having is attachment towards God. Because that attachment will remove all the other attachments. It's something which is so strong.
Somewhere here, Swami mentions about the silence, the same solitude that you were talking about, which William Wordsworth experienced. That silence and that solitude, that when you touch that note of nothingness.
The bliss of solitude.
The bliss of solitude. Because here also Swami mentions about if you want to really water a tree, you're not going to go and water the flowers, the branches, you're going to water the roots. And there is this beautiful analogy which Swami gives, and which is there in the Gita as well. Bijam mam sarva bhutanam. Swami mentions that in this discourse. How the seed in absolute silence, I would say, it's just under the earth, and it waits for the right time when it has to sprout. It has got the entire tree within itself, and it just waits in silence. Because there is a beautiful book called Silence as Yoga. Written by Swami Paramananda. Actually, it's from the Ramakrishna Mutt. Just a very small booklet, but so beautiful. It's called Silence as Yoga. And the first few lines of the book, they say, just like the seed that stays silently underneath the soil. It's not that it is incapable. It's not that it's waiting for the right time. It has that infinite potential to become the huge tree. But it has to wait for the right time.
It has to wait for the right time.
It's very beautiful.
So profound.
So that book is really very beautiful, Silence as Yoga. So I think with that, should we go on to the next clip?
Right.
Yeah.
I think this is the 6th clip in that discourse.
Okay.
ధన నిధికి లోకములో కొన్ని రకమైనటువంటి కట్టుబాట్లు చేస్తుంటారు.
For the treasure, they put certain restrictions and certain
కొన్ని
protections.
బ్యాంకులు ఉన్నాయి. బ్యాంకుల్లో కావలసినంత ధనం ఉంటుండాలి.
Banks have plenty of money.
కానీ కేవలం ఆ ధనమును అట్నే విసర్జించిపోవటం లేదు. దానికి కావలసినంత బందోబస్తు చేస్తున్నారు.
They provide security.
ఇనుప ద్వారములు బంధిస్తున్నారు. పెద్ద పెద్ద లాక్స్, బీగములంతా తగిలిస్తున్నారు. రాత్రింపగలు కూడాను పారావారు దానిని చక్కగా రక్షిస్తున్నారు. అందులో ఉన్న ధనాన్ని మనం పొందాలనుకుంటుంటే ఈ యొక్క ద్వారములు విరగ్గొట్టాలి, తాళములు పగలగొట్టాలి. అందులో వాచ్మ్యాన్ గా ఉండేటువంటి గుర్కాలు వాడిని కొట్టి వాడి దగ్గర అన్ని విధాల స్వాధీనం చేసుకోవాలి.
If you should get that money, you have to break the doors, you have to break open the locks, you have to remove the
అప్పుడే ఆ
watchman.
యొక్క ధనము మనకు లభ్యమవుతుంది.
Then only you can get hold of that wealth.
అదే విధముగానే ఈ ఆనందం అనేటువంటి నిధికి ఒక విధమైనటువంటి యొక్క భద్రత ఏర్పడి ఉంది.
In the same way, for this wealth of bliss, it is very well protected.
దీనిని కాపాడేటువంటిది ఏమిటి?
What is it that protects this wealth?
అహంకారం అనే సర్పము సర్వత్రా సంచరిస్తూనే ఉంటుంటాది. ఏ నిర్విరామంగా కూడా తిరుగుతూ ఉంటాది.
The snake of ego goes round and round this wealth and tries to protect this wealth.
కనుక దాని దగ్గరికి ఎవరు పోలేకపోతున్నారు.
That is why no one is able to go to this wealth of bliss.
ఎవడు ఈ అహంకారం అనే సర్పమును నిర్మూలము గావించునో వానికే ఈ ఆనందం అనే నిధి లభ్యమవుతుంది.
The one who kills this snake of ego will be able to get hold of the bliss of joy.
కనుక ఈ అహంకారం కేవలము అజ్ఞానం చేత ఆవరించినటువంటిది.
This ego is full of ignorance.
ఈ అహంకారమునకు కారణం ఏమిటి?
What is the reason for this ego?
ధనమా కారణం?
Is it wealth?
లేక బలమా కారణం?
Is it strength?
లేక స్థానమా కారణం?
Is it
అధికారమా కారణం? విద్యనా కారణం? ఇవి ఏవీ కారణం కాదు. ఇవన్నీ అల్పమైనటువంటి శక్తులు.
the education? All these things are very small excuses.
ఇవన్నీ అహంకారానికి ఎట్లా కారణం అవుతాయి?
How can they be a cause for the ahankara or the ego?
దేహ భ్రాంతియే దీనికి మూల కారణం.
It is the delusion of the physical body alone which is responsible for this ego.
ఇవన్నీ ఎంతకాలం? అందుకోసమే శంకరాచార్య మా కురు ధన జన యౌవన గర్వం హరతి నిమిష కాల సర్వం మా కురు ధన జన యౌవన గర్వం. ఈ ధనము బలము ఈ యొక్క సంపదను గురించి అహంకారపడుతున్నాడు. ఇది ఎంతసేపు? క్షణములో మార్పు చెందుతుంది.
If man is suffering from pride and vanity on account of the wealth, on account of the strength, on account of beauty, etc., for how long will they last? They are all momentary.
ఇవందరూ కూడా అనుభవించినటువంటి వ్యక్తులు ఎక్కడున్నారు స్థిరంగా?
Where are those people who have enjoyed all these things now?
గొప్ప గొప్ప పదవులనంతా ఏలి సిరి సంపదలను అనుభవించి ప్రఖ్యాతిని పొంది రారాజులుగా మారి చక్రవర్తులుగా మారినటువంటి వ్యక్తులంతా ఎక్కడున్నారు ఇప్పుడు?
Where are those people who have enjoyed great wealth and great properties and who have become emperors?
ఉన్నారా? లేక వారి స్థానం ఉన్నాయా? వారి యొక్క ధనం ఉండదా? ఏదీ లేదు.
Is their wealth found? Are they found? Is their position permanent? Nothing is permanent. They are not at all found today.
ప్రాచీన కాలం నుండి భారతదేశం నందు అనేక మంది అనేక రకములైనటువంటి యొక్క సాధనలు సలిపి ఇవన్నీను అనిత్యమని లోకానికి చాటుతూ వచ్చారు.
Great souls and sages have done a lot of penance to find out the impermanence of these things.
భగవద్గీత కూడాను అనిత్యం అసుఖం లోకం అని చాటిపోయింది.
The same thing has been declared by Bhagavad Gita. This world is impermanent and full of sorrow.
నిరత సత్య ప్రౌఢి ధరణి నేలిన హరిశ్చంద్రుడి ధరబాసి చనగలేదా?
Was not Harishchandra compelled to leave this world, although he followed the path of truth?
ఎల్ల లోకములేల యశగు శ్రీ నలరాజు తన వెంట భూమిని కొనుచు చననా.
King Nala, who was emperor of emperors, could he carry a bit of earth with him?
కృతయుగంబునకు అలంకృతి చేయు మాధాత సిరిమూట గట్టుక నరుగజనన.
Mandata, who was a piece of decoration for Kruta age itself, could he carry with him either name or
జలది
fame?
సేతు కట్టే అలనాటి శ్రీరాముడి పుడురుపై నున్నవాడ.
Sri Rama, who constructed a bridge across the ocean, is he now?
ఎందరెందరు రాజులు ఎగినారో
So many kings have disappeared.
కరును వెంట కొని పోవరి ఊర్వితళము.
Not even one carried a handful of mud with him.
మీరు మాత్రము మీదు సిరియు సంపద విద్యయు తలను గట్టుక పోదురా.
Are you going to carry with you your own wealth, your own properties, your own education?
విద్యార్థులారా,
Oh dear students,
ఏది మన వెంట రాదు.
we are not going to carry anything with us.
వచ్చేది రెండే,
there are only two things which we
అదే
carry.
మంచి చెడ్డ.
And that is good or bad.
మనం ఏది చేస్తామో అది మాత్రం మన వెంట వస్తుంది.
Whatever we do, you are going to carry the results of that.
మంచిని చేసి మంచిని తీసుకోండి.
Do good and reap the fruits thereof.
ఏ విత్తును నాటుతామో అదే ఫలమే మనకు లభిస్తుంది.
Whatever seed you sow, the same fruit you are
విద్యార్థులారా,
going to
మీరు
get.
తాత్కాలికంగా దీనిని అలక్ష్యం చేస్తున్నారు.
Dear students, you are
భవిష్యత్తులో ఏనాటికైనా కూడాను ఇవి ఆ అనుసరించుకొని ఇది మొక్కలుగా రాక తప్పదు.
You are neglecting and ignoring these truths. In future, you are going to reap the fruits of all your
నీవు
actions.
ముండ బీజములు వేయి, పండ్ల బీజములు వేయి, తిరిగి అవి మొక్కలుగా వస్తాయి.
Whatever seed you sow, whether it is a thorn seed or any
అట్టి
other seed, you are
విశ్వాసమే
going to get the
భారతీయుల
fruit.
యొక్క విశ్వాసము. కర్మఫల సిద్ధాంతాన్ని విశ్వసించినటువంటి వారు భారతీయులు.
Bharatiyas had firm faith in this particular theory of action and the fruits thereof.
కనుక మీ హృదయములో మంచిని ఆవిర్భవింప చేసుకుని,
Therefore, develop good thoughts in your heart.
నేను ఆత్మస్వరూపుడను,
Consider yourself as the very
నా
embodiment
భావం
of Atma.
బ్రహ్మస్వభావము,
My very nature is
నేను
nature
ఈ
of
పని
Brahma.
చేయదగినదా చేయతగనిదా,
Is it appropriate to my nature to do this particular thing or not?
నేను ఆత్మగా ఉండి ఈ అనాత్మ సంబంధమైనటువంటి తుచ్చ కార్యములను నేను ప్రవేశించడం మంచిదా కాదు అనేటువంటి ప్రతి కార్యమునందు కూడాను తన యొక్క దివ్యత్వాన్ని తాను స్మరించి కార్యములో ప్రవేశించాలి.
Whatever work you undertake, remember your divine nature and undertake
అప్పుడే
appropriate to that.
దోషములకు దూరం అవుతాడు,
Then only you will be free from all defects.
పాశములకు దూరం అవుతాడు,
You will be free from bondage.
దోషములకు దూరం అవుతాడు,
You will be free from all kind of deceit.
ఆత్మ ఆశలో ప్రవేశిస్తాడు.
Then you will get into the aspiration of Atma.
ఇలాంటి విచారణ విద్యార్థులకు అత్యవసరం.
Students should develop this kind of thinking.
మనం చదువుతున్నాం,
We are studying.
గొప్ప గొప్ప డిగ్రీలు తీసుకుంటున్నాం,
We are taking big degrees.
ఇంకా విదేశాలకంతా వెళ్లి ఇంకా అధికమైనటువంటి డిగ్రీలు పొందుతున్నాం.
We are going to obtain greater degrees than this.
ఈ యొక్క చదువులు చదివి మనం దేనిని సంపాదిస్తున్నాం?
What is it that we are going to achieve by this kind of education?
ఈ చదువులు చదివి ఉద్యోగంలో చేరి
After this studies and education, we are going to
లంచాలు
take a job.
పుచ్చుకోవటం కోసమా,
Is it for
మోసాలు చేయటం కోసమా, అబద్ధాలు ఆడటం కోసమా, పొట్టను పోషించుకునే కోసమా? కాదు కాదు. ఈ చదువులు ఇలాంటి అపవిత్రమైన మార్గంలో నా ప్రవేశపెట్టడం.
we should not, this education is not meant for taking bribery, for deceiving people, for going in the wrong path. Certainly not for that.
పరులను మోసగించి పొట్టను పోషించుకోవాలనుకుంటే ఈ విద్యలు ఎందుకు?
If you want to earn by deceiving others, why this education at all?
కనుక మన విద్య ఆత్మ విద్య.
Our education is education of Atma.
దీని ద్వారా మనము పవిత్రమైన ఆదర్శవంతమైనటువంటి యొక్క దీనిని మనం లోకానికి అందించాలి.
We have to offer our life to go as an ideal student and in the ideal path.
ధ్యానుడు పొట్ట నింపుకునే కోసమని 2 చేతులనిచ్చాడు.
For filling this small stomach, God has
2
given
చేతుల
2
ముందుకు
hands.
పని జరిగితే, పని చేస్తే, కష్టపడి శ్రమిస్తే పొట్ట నిండదా?
If you work hard with both hands, can you not fill your small stomach?
మనం 2 చేతులతో శ్రమించి పని చేయటం లేదు.
We are not working hard with both hands.
కనుకనే మనము ఈ అవస్థలకు గురి అయిపోతున్నాము.
That is the reason why we are put to troubles.
మనం కర్మణ్యేవ అధికారస్య, మన కర్మనే మన ప్రధానమైనటువంటి లక్ష్యము.
We have every right for action.
పవిత్ర కర్మలు ఆచరించాలి,
We should do sacred action,
ఆదర్శవంతమైన కర్మలు ఆచరించాలి,
ideal actions,
అన్యులకు సహాయకరమైనటువంటి కర్మలు ఆచరించాలి.
helpful actions in the service of others.
లోకోద్ధారమునకై మనము తగినటువంటి జీవితం కూడా అంకితం చేయాలి.
We should offer our life for the good and greatness of the world and happiness.
స్వరూపం.
The world is the very embodiment.
మన దేశము మన యొక్క మాతృదేశము, ఇది మాతృ స్వభావము.
We should love our country as our motherland.
కనుక ఇట్టి మాతృభావమే మన యందు లేకపోతే మనం ఇంకా ఏ విధంగా ఈ యొక్క జగత్తులో ఉండగలము?
If we don't develop such sacred feeling of love of the mother, what is the use of this life at all?
I think Swami straight away answered the question which we started beginning with. I said, where does practice and precept come in this? So beautifully, the first part of the discourse, Swami spoke about being in that state of Advaita, understanding that you are the Atman.
Correct.
And now Swami started breaking it down and saying that if you are in that state, how will you conduct yourself? how will you live in a society? How you will become a better citizen in the society you're living in? And so beautifully and seamlessly Swami has connected the two states.
Correct.
Which we often think that, that and this don't go together. So very beautifully Swami has connected it.
My understanding of the whole thing is, love without duty is divine.
Divine. Yeah.
Now, because you think that being a good citizen, I have to be patriotic. The moment you think you have to be, you're doing it as a duty. The moment you think I am so and so, I have to do this, it's a duty. It is something which you think you have to do. But love without duty, that is beyond the bounds of duty, when every act of yours is based...
Unconditional love.
Yes. Unconditional spontaneity. That spontaneity, the moment it comes, you are in that state of oneness.
Because it's your nature.
It's your nature, yes.
Yeah.
That's the beauty. And the moment it becomes spontaneous, I think that's what it is. Then you're there. This whole analogy of having lot of wealth and lot of precious things locked up in an iron box, and he says you have to actually hit the watchman and then go to get the treasure. That's what Swami would often sing, Payo ji maine, naam ratan dan payo. Yeah.
Or vanquish the snake.
Yeah.
Of ahamkara.
Correct. He says that precious treasure that you have is locked up deep inside.
Yeah.
So he says ahankara is the serpent that is guarding that.
I had one a beautiful opportunity to pray to Bhagwan how to really vanquish the ahankar. It so happened that I wanted to come to Prashanti Nilayam. A little bit of digression here.
Sure.
I wanted to come to Prashanti Nilayam to observe the Ishwaramma Divas. And something that normally doesn't happen with students, because at that point of time we are in Brindavan.
Right.
So I just written a letter to Swami. And in the evening, Mr. C. Srinivas, who was a warden, he just called me and said, Swami has accepted your letter and your prayer, and he has called you to Prashanti Nilayam. And imagine at that point of time, at that age, that feeling of self-importance. Then it was announced that Sunam is going to Prashanti Nilayam, and you can write your letters and he will take it. So almost I felt like an ambassador carrying everyone's letter like a duta. And I came to Prashanti Nilayam, and with that feel again, I sat right in the front, thinking that Swami will just come and ask me, when did you come? Ippudu chao. Nothing like that happened. He just came out, crushed me. He just went out and gave darshan. And I thought while coming back he would take me in. He didn't do that. Then I went inside the bhajan hall and I sat there. And then, of course, there was a bhajan which I had not been allowed to sing for a long time. But then I sang that song, Allahu Akbar. Then after the bhajan, by the time I was very much penitent, I had been doing my introspection and everything. But then after the Mangal Aarti, he did something very unconventional, in the true sense of the term. After the Aarati, he took me to his room, to the interview room, through his door. From there, he led me into the interview room. The moment he closed the door, he faced me and said, "Itna ahankar karta hai, kitna itna ahankar karta hai." He was so much in pain, like, it sounded like that, that I felt that I could feel it. Then I said, Swami, I broke down and said, Swami, मैं क्या करूं? हो जाता है, Swami, अहंकार हो जाता है. It just happens. I have no control on it, Swami. Then Swami said, देखो, ऐसा करना, जब भी अहंकार होता है, साई ईश्वरार्पणमस्तु, ये मंत्र बोलो. कैसा? Then I said, Swami, साई ईश्वरार्पणमस्तु. इतना easy है. ऋषि के लिए पहले बहुत difficult था. You have to do sadhana. Swami was telling, to you get over the ahankar, you have to do so many sadhanas. Here it's simple as, I offer it to you. Then उसका meaning क्या है? उसके ऊपर ध्यान देना है. ऐसे बोलने से नहीं होता है. फिर उस पे ध्यान देना है. Sai Ishwara Arpanamastu, the moment you say that, then the burden of whatever you have done, your action, all your volitional acts, everything just gets wiped away. And there is no ahankar, Swami said. So since that day till date, whatever I do in my life, again and again it keeps coming, because I know that the hoods of ahankar, it keeps, rising up. So we need to again and again constantly remind ourselves and say that Sai Ishwara Arpanamastu, Sai Ishwara Arpanamastu. It's a Maha Mantra for me at least. And
for everybody,
for
the whole world. So grateful to you for sharing such a beautiful things.
So beautiful.
It's so amazing.
Yeah.
In fact, someone was explaining this very thing, you say offering it to God.
Yeah.
And they said, why do you have this symbolism in most religions, where when you offer something to God, you throw it in fire? You have yagnam, homam. You throw it into fire. Why not have a bowl of or a trough of water and put it in that? Why offerings into fire? Because fire is the one place where when you put it, it's irretrievable. Everything that comes out of that offering and that offering itself is irretrievable.
Yeah.
So that's why they say when you offer something to God, your act or your emotions, you say that I'm offering it in entirety. I don't want anything back from it.
Yeah.
There is absolutely no good effects or bad effects from it. Entirely offering it to God. I think when Swami said it's not just saying it, but understanding what you mean, which means you're not entertaining any thoughts after that of self-guilt or of, anything which comes out of that act.
Pure renunciation.
What Swami said.
I was just reading a few days back about the birth of Subramanya Swami, Kartikeya. Actually part of Kumara Sambhava of Kalidasa. Just, happened to get interested and I was just reading it. So very beautifully he says, he describes the penance of Parvati. Now if you take Parvati as all of us, Prakriti, and Lord Shiva is Atma, the one who is ever immersed in the bliss of Atman. So he's sitting there, lost in penance, and in complete, identity with the Atman. Parvati is going there and serving him. And Mother Parvati is doing the seva. And he is just accepting it in a very, very detached, and he is always in tune with the Atman. And then Manmata comes. And then he tries to spring this whole relationship between Lord Shiva and Mother Parvati. There he says it is like the mind. He says the mind which tries to, bind Mother Parvati to that form. So when Mother Parvati is trying to get the Lord's attention on her form, immediately the third eye opens and Manmata is burned down. So the third eye just opens and Manmata is immediately, the mind is just burnt. So then Mother Parvati realizes that you cannot go close to the Lord by any other means. So she goes and gives up her body attachments. She gives up her identification with the body. In fact, it's written there when she goes back to her father. Her father was the one who initially said you have to get married only to Lord Shiva. Because Narada came and whispered the cosmic secret into his ear. So he was saying, but after this thing happened and seeing the Rudra Roop of Lord Shiva just burnt Manmata and vanished from there. So now it is left to Mother Parvati that she has to earn his grace again. So then her father, who was the one who proposed it in the first place, asked, do you think you will be able to do it? You saw his form, she says nothing. He says, whatever it is. Then she does penance. She goes beyond her body consciousness. And that is when Lord comes and accepts her. I think the whole story has a very sweet and, very symbolic meaning. If you want to really go close to the Lord Shiva or the Atman, you have to go beyond body consciousness.
It's the coming together of being and becoming.
That's true. That's true. So when I was just reading that and Ahankara, Swami says, Aham plus Akaram, you are attracting attention on your body. And you think you are his body, you can't win the Lord like that. The same like how you narrated this incident. Very beautiful.
That beautiful Padyam which Swami says, of all the kings and Swami even adds Rama's name in that. Swami says, even the avatars have come and gone, they have not taken anything. Even if you're an avatar, what you take from this place is going to be nothing.
Correct.
And with so much of emphasis, Swami says, the great souls who have nothing to gain from your detachment have told you this truth. That this world is unreal. There's nothing there in this world. But you're not ready to listen. It's a feeling Swami expressed in an earlier discourse also. Swami says you're ready to listen to those who are selfish. When you talk about advertisements, you talk about the lobbying which happens here. It's all information given to you with a very, very selfish and ulterior motive. Swami says we are biting into that. But people who have renounced everything in the world, they are coming and tell you this is the truth. This is the right path. This is what you should do. But you're not ready to listen to that. The words of those selfless people, you're not ready to listen and accept. And that's again what Swami is telling. They have great souls who have done penance and they've understood that this is anityam. But you don't want to listen to them.
On some occasion, Swami has so beautifully said that, it really makes you total renunciate then and there, the moment you hear about it, because we are all the time proud about our body, and we are so conscious of the body and things around us at a very gross level. And then Swami said, you are just like a worthless, chest.
Yes.
It is a worthless iron chest.
Iron chest.
And if there is anything worthwhile there, and if you are being respected by people, it's because of the contents of the iron chest.
Correct.
And the contents of the Atma and the bliss attached to the Atma. So because of the Atmic bliss, the iron chest, which is so worthless, rusted, it has so much value. And the day the Atma is not there, in fact, do you remember that beautiful Upanishadic story that Swami talks about the different limbs of the body, they quarrel and they try to prove that
Who is more important?
Yeah, is it Kathopanishad?
Oh, I'm not sure.
So they try to tell that, each one of them tries to say that I am the most important. And ultimately the Atma listens to the whole thing and says, okay, if you guys are important, I think I'll take leave.
There's other thing which Swami is telling you about, Swami is putting in perspective the knowledge which you seek otherwise and the real knowledge which Swami wants you to seek. Swami is saying that,
Correct.
the knowledge which you spend years of your life seeking, you just need to fill your stomach. It just requires you to do a little bit of hard labor and you can fill your stomach. So he's saying it's so simple, but you're wasting so much of your time in that. The real knowledge which is what you come here for. You're missing out on that, and to fill this small stomach, you're filling all your time.
Yeah.
And so beautifully, that Swami is connecting with, when you understand it's so simple to lead a life, then the chance of you getting into corrupt practices, the chance of you manipulating people, and the chance of you being selfish, all that fades away. When you realize it's so simple to lead a life, it's so simple to just live.
Also here, where Swami says, when you're leading your life, when you're doing actions, before every action, pause and think.
Right.
I am the Atma. Is it proper for me to do such an act or not? That sets everything in perspective. It's interesting, slight digression from here. There was one astrologer whom we met, who could just see your face and tell you everything about you. And you really need not have to tell him your birth, date and everything. You just sit in front of him and he will look at your face. Okay, people may call it face reading, anything. But this person was so amazing. Then he said, the reason why I'm telling you all this, you can also do it. Anybody can do it. Then we asked him, how do you do it? He says, only two things. First is, forget yourself and think 100% for the benefit of the person sitting opposite you. Selflessly, if you think what I am going to say is purely for his benefit, then words will just flow. He says words will flow, and it's amazing because the way he predicts, he talks about your past, your innermost secrets. It's almost like Swami standing in front of you and speaking to you. I mean, the way he predicts, you can never say everything of what he says may not be right, but 99% things were so accurate. And then he said, I'm telling all this only to make you also. He's a normal postman. He's just there. And he doesn't even do this like a profession, but for a few of us who know and meet him, he just brings out this beautiful truth. He says, you can do it. So he says, every action that you do, if you forget yourself and you're limiting yourself, thinking that I am this, he says, forget yourself and think the person who's sitting in front of you is yourself, and you have to think for the welfare of that person. Automatically words will come.
He's just your extension.
Exactly. Yeah. Automatically words will come.
So there is a connection, there is an interlink connection already.
Very beautiful.
Yeah.
So he says, every action I do, just think, I am the Atma. Is it proper for me to do or not? So this was just a small digression, but when you can actually do things, not keeping in mind that I am so and so, I am so and so. So when I am doing this body, I should not think I am Sai Prakash. I am going to play the harmonium for the Mandir Bhajan. I should just think I am the Atman playing it.
And if we could take it to the next level, even at the point of simulation, that everybody is the same Atma,
Correct.
then there would be nothing else except this Advaitic Anubhuti. Even, at our level, we would start on a very, on the right note.
Very true. And this is exactly what happens when Jnanadeva, I think, tells the buffalo to chant Vedam.
Exactly.
He's actually calling out the Atma from within the Dunnapota, the buffalo, and it chants the Vedam. Because there is infinite potential in everybody.
Yeah.
So one of the Advaitic teachers, he says, see what Swami said in the second discourse, the body is jadam, body is inert. Okay, since you think that you are this body, you have the limited ability of extending your Chaitanya only to this body.
Correct.
Because you are so immersed in the idea of the body.
So well
If you are
said.
able to remove this idea that I am this body, you can insert the Chaitanya in anything and make it do anything.
Very true.
It becomes infinite.
It becomes infinite. Just what Swami did. He could create objects because he could make the atom obey what he wanted, what he was telling. He said your ability to remove this asakti or chaitanya, what Swami says, from this body and insert it to anything and make anything do anything.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Coming back to this thing of Swami's telling that if you think that you are the Atman, you will not do these things. Reminded of a conversation I had with one of our former students. He's from the army. He gave a very interesting thing, perspective. He said, see, if you join the army, you need to go through so much of training before you're given a gun in your hand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just take it to the other side. The Indian army is all the time battling with terrorists and extremists. He said, those guys, it takes only 3 days. They catch a youngster, maybe a 16, 17-year-old, 3 days of training and he's given a gun and he's sent into the war front. So he said, what is the difference? He said, to teach a man to shoot, it takes only 3 days. But to give a gun to a man and to teach him not to shoot, it takes months.
Wow.
Beautiful.
So beautiful.
And Swami is telling here that self-knowledge will lead you to this kind of thinking. I am the Atman. Should I do this? Should I not do this? Is this the right thing to do? He said that ability to hold yourself back and do the right thing, that needs really months and months of training, and that is the true knowledge. That worldly knowledge says that no, I am educated, I can do this, I am entitled to this, I am allowed to do this. The ability to use your senses indiscriminately, you don't need the ultimate knowledge.
That's true. And here Swami actually ends this clip in a very beautiful point, and one of his most favorite points, that is patriotism. And then I think we should play
We can go to the next clip. It's
clip.
about a 6-minute clip. It will be very interesting because Swami is really firing up right now. It would be a good clip to end the program in.
ఒకానొక సమయంలో కలకత్తా యూనివర్సిటీ లోపల సుభాష్ చంద్రబోస్ చదువుతూ ఉన్నాడు.
Once upon a time, Subhas Bose was undergoing his studies in the University of Calcutta.
అందులో ఒక బ్రిటిష్ లెక్చరరు భారతదేశాన్ని, భారతీయుల గురించి కొంచెం అలక్ష్యంగా, హేళనగా తాను చెప్పుతూ ఉండేటువంటి వాడు.
There was a lecturer from Britain who was making fun of and criticizing Bharat.
కానీ ఈ విధమైనటువంటి తన మాతృదేశం యొక్క దూషణను తాను వినలేకపోయాడు.
Bose was not able to hear the criticism of his motherland.
ఇది నా ప్రియ మాతృదేశము,
This is my dear motherland.
ఇది నా ప్రియ మాతృభాష,
This is my dear mother
ఇదే
tongue.
నా మతము,
This is my
ఇదే నా
religion.
అభిమతము,
This is
ఇదే నా
my
వ్రతము.
this is my very religion itself.
దేశాభిమానమే లేకుండా, దేహం యొక్క దీనినే మనం విచారణ చేయకుండా మనం జీవించుతున్నామంటే ఇది నిజంగా మనకు మాతృదేశంగా భావిస్తున్నామా? కాదు. మాతృదేశానికి ఏమైనా కూడా నేను త్యాగం చేయాలని సంకల్పించుకున్నాడు సుభాష్ చంద్రబోస్.
He took a firm resolution for the sake of his dear motherland. He should be prepared to give up anything.
కానీ విచక్షణ జ్ఞానం కలిగినటువంటి వాడు కనుక కొంతసేపు ఓపిక పట్టుకున్నాడు.
But he was blessed with a lot of discrimination. He exercised patience.
కానీ వినలేకపోయాడు ఆ మాటలు.
But the criticism continued. He was not able to
ఒక్కతూరి
bear.
3 డస్ట్లంతా ఎగిరిపోయేసేసి ఆ యొక్క బ్రిటిష్ వాడిని తల పట్టుకొని తన చేతులు ఉన్నటువంటి చెప్పులు తీసుకుని ఊరికి కొట్టేశాడు.
He jumped over 3 benches in one go and caught hold of
దేనినైనా
it.
నేను సహిస్తాను, నా మాతృదేశాన్ని నేను దూషించడం నేను సహించలేను.
I can bear anything, but not criticism of our motherland, he said.
జననీ జన్మభూమశ్చ స్వర్గాధిపి గరీయసి, నేను నరకమునకు పోయినా పర్వాలేదు, నా యొక్క దేశం యొక్క విషయాన్ని నేను కాపాడుకోవాలి.
I am prepared to go even to hell, but
ఇలాంటి
for the honor
దేశాభిమానం
and protection of my
కలిగినటువంటి
mother.
సుభాష్ చంద్రబోస్.
Such was the Bose who
ఈ
lived.
దృశ్యాన్ని చూసినటువంటి విద్యార్థులందరూ కూడాను ఏమీ చేయలేకపోయారు.
Students who saw this sight were finding themselves helpless.
కేవలం పులిపిల్ల వలె ఎగిరి అతన్ని అనేక రకములుగా కూడా హింసిస్తున్నాడు. అతను హెల్ప్ మీ హెల్ప్ మీ హెల్ప్ మీ అని అంటున్నాడు, కానీ ఎవరు హెల్ప్ లేదు.
And that teacher began crying, please help me, help me, help me. Like a tiger cub, he pounced upon him
ఈ
and
వార్త కొన్ని క్షణాల లోపల యూనివర్సిటీ అంతా ప్రాకిపోయింది.
within a few minutes, this news spread to the entire university.
ఎమర్జెన్సీ మీటింగ్ పెట్టుకున్నారు.
There was an emergency meeting.
ఇతన్ని ఇంకా 5 సంవత్సరములు ఈ కాలేజీలో ఏమాత్రం మన కలకత్తా యూనివర్సిటీలో చదవడానికి అవకాశం లేదని ఒక నిర్ణయం చేసుకున్నారు.
They resolved that Bose should be debarred for 5 years from Calcutta University.
దానితో అతని చదువునైనా కూడా త్యాగం చేశాడు.
He was prepared to give up his education.
నిజమైనటువంటిది నా మాతృభూమి, నా రక్తమంతా కూడాను భారతదేశంలో పుట్టినటువంటిది, భారతదేశంలో పెరిగినటువంటిది, భారతదేశానికి అంకితం కావాలి.
My blood is meant for sacrificing for the sake and for the honor of my own nation, my
కృతజ్ఞతను
motherland.
తాను పాటిస్తూ వచ్చాడు.
And that is how he participated in the movements.
తండ్రి ఈ యొక్క విషయాన్ని గుర్తించి తాను లండన్ కు పంపించాడు.
Father,
ఇండియాలో చదవడానికి అవకాశం లేదు.
he did not have an opportunity for further studies here. Then he was sent to London.
అక్కడ కూడా పోయి దేశాభిమానాన్ని హృదయంలో పెట్టుకున్నాడు. నా పవిత్రమైన భారతదేశము త్యాగభూమి, యోగభూమి, కర్మభూమి కాదు భోగభూమి.
Even after he went to London, he always remembered that his motherland, that is India, is a great country, a country which is devoted to yoga and
నేను
which is,
చదవడానికి వచ్చినానే కానీ ఈ దేశంలో స్థిరమైపోవడానికి రాలేదు.
I have come to this country only for studies, not to
అని
settle down
అతి
here.
శ్రద్ధ భక్తితో చదివేసేసి ICS పాస్ చేశాడు మంచి స్థాయిలో.
He studied with a lot of interest and passed his ICS examination with distinction.
తిరిగి అక్కడి నుంచి వచ్చి రాజకీయంలోనే ప్రవేశించాడు.
He came back to Bharat and he entered the politics.
నేను ఈ దేశం యొక్క ఆహారంతో ఈ దేహాన్ని పోషించుకున్నాను.
My body was its very existence
ఈ
for the
దేశం
food.
యొక్క పానీయం చేత జలం చేతనే నా దేహాన్ని కాపాడుకున్నాను.
I have protected my body with the waters of this country.
కనుక నా దేశమునకు నేను కృతజ్ఞత చూపించాలి.
I must show gratitude to this motherland.
చూశారా? అదే విధముగా మన సంస్థకు కానీ మనం ఎవరి నుండి ఇంత స్థాయికి మనం వచ్చామనేటువంటి ఒక విషయం కానీ ఆ కృతజ్ఞతను మాత్రము విద్యార్థులు మరవరాదు.
Students should always have that kind of gratitude, remembering by whose grace and by whose help one has come up in life.
అది నిజమైనటువంటి యొక్క దీక్ష, నిజమైన త్యాగం.
That is the correct type of resolution. and
స్వార్థాన్ని
vow.
త్యాగం చేసి పరార్థాన్ని విశ్వసించి పరమార్థాన్ని పొందాలి.
Renounce selfishness. Have firm faith in the transcendental and
విద్యార్థులారా,
reach the transcendental goal.
భగవద్గీత కానీ, బైబుల్ కానీ, ఖురాన్ కానీ, గ్రంథరాజ్యము కానీ, ఇంకా ఏ విధమైనటువంటి పవిత్ర గ్రంథములు అయినప్పటికీ ఇవి పారాయణ నిమిత్తమై అది ఆవిర్భవించలేదు.
Whether it is Bhagavad Gita, Bible, Quran or any sacred scripture, they are not meant only for merely studying and living.
ఆచరించే నిమిత్తమై అవి అందించినటువంటి
All of them have come for the purpose of
మనం
practicing.
ఆచరణలో పెట్టాలి.
But to practice the truth
ఎన్ని
there.
శ్లోకాలు చదివి మన ప్రయోజనం ఏమిటి?
What is the use of memorizing any number of
ఎన్ని
stanzas?
విధమైనటువంటి వ్యాఖ్యానం చేసే ప్రయోజనం ఏమిటి?
What is the use of offering any number of commentaries on them?
కాదు. గంగ గోవు పాలు గంటడైన చాలు, కడవడైన కలవు పాలు. కౌ మిల్క్ 1 టీ స్పూన్ ఉండినా చాలు, వై బ్యారెట్స్ ఆఫ్ డాంకీ మిల్క్.
It is sufficient to have a spoon full of cow's milk. Why have barrels of donkey's milk?
చదువుతుంటాం భగవద్గీతలు పారాయణ ఎన్ని చేస్తుంటాము. 700 శ్లోకాలు కంఠం చేస్తున్నాను. కంఠానికి భారమే తప్ప తన యొక్క బాధలకు నివారణ ఏమాత్రం కూడా సల్పలేవు.
Studying and memorizing Bhagavad Gita any number of times and repeating it is only a burden for your own throat. No use.
That was that clip in Subhash Chandra Bose, and that's something which we've always noticed. You could see that fire in Swami's eyes whenever he spoke about at least Subhash Chandra Bose.
Amazing, because once I remember one of those, I think it was Independence Day or so, the students actually put up a drama, and Swami was sitting on the veranda, and suddenly Swami was signaling that he wanted to do something. People were wondering what. Swami says, I want to speak. And we were wondering why suddenly Swami was, because Independence Day generally Swami was not giving a discourse. Then when he started his discourse, he said, there is one speaker put in front of me on which it is written Bose.
Oh.
The moment I saw that,
Bose
I wanted
speaker.
to speak
On Subhas
Chandra Bose.
So beautiful.
And he spoke about Subhas Chandra Bose,
So
that discourse.
I remember, I think in 2005, one of the convocation discourses, I was editing that video which we were making for the convocation time. There Swami was speaking about patriotism, he was speaking about the various leaders. At one point Swami said, see, people always speak about Gandhi, Nehru and a few of those popular leaders. And Swami said, but people are not speaking enough about Subhas Chandra Bose. Swami said, and when just Swami said that, there's one person who's not being spoken enough about, and Swami said, he's Subhas Chandra Bose. And for 2 seconds Swami just choked when Swami said that. And that was the time when we were not seeing Swami getting so emotional. Swami was that stern self of his always, especially while giving a discourse. But because we were doing that editing and we were having a very close-up shot of that, we saw for 2 seconds Swami just swallowed, and you could see that Swami had become emotional just taking the name of Subhas Chandra Bose.
What I would feel is, whenever Swami spoke about any of these patriots, one of the main reasons why Swami exhibits that type of emotion, and it could be a message to all of us that you don't live for your swartha, as
Right.
Swami said.
The concluding
So
statement.
concluding statement. It is for parartha, because these were people who lived very selflessly, and they never really thought about their own individual identity and their happiness, because they had merged their identity with the totality. And that is one reason why they deserved so much, love of Bhagwan. But I am reminded of so many occasions on which Swami has given an entire exegesis on, this patriotism that Swami talks about. And, a lot of people would have questions in their heart that, is it patriotism all about a country? Love for a country. But on many occasions Swami has said that, when you talk about Bharata Desha, Bharata is Bhavaraga Tala. It's an abstraction, it's a universal abstraction. And taking it to the next level, Swami has said that true patriotism is when you live in nature, when you live for nature, your love for nature, the whole of sentient and insentient beings, the whole of, humanity, the whole of creation, the whole cosmos, when you fall in love. And this Vasundhara, this, your country is not only a geographical configuration, but your country is this whole entire universe, is your country. So, patriotism at that level, that is one thing. Then the other thing that Swami has said on many occasions is, you have come from a land of bliss. You belong to that. Now that you are just loitering around here, caught up in this samsara, and samsara is nothing but, these 5 elements, and then your manas, buddhi, chitta, ahankar. And then because you are caught up there, never forget the bliss, though you are enjoying here now, in this duality, but never forget the bliss of that land to which you belong. So you should be all the time dwelling on that, so that is Paramartha. So at the Paramarthic level, at Swartha to Parartha, that is definitely there, but to reach Paramartha, we should all the time dwell in Paramartha. So that message that Swami has all the time so beautifully given us.
Talking about patriotism, almost most of his discourses you really find this coming through, especially even the convocation discourses where Swami is addressing students, is always firing up with this patriotism. In fact, I remember very clearly after we finished our college, we were waiting for a few months, and one of those interviews when Swami called, with so much of involvement and so much of passion, Swami said, you go today, go to villages and serve. I will take care of everything of yours. And he said, start small scale industries. I will help. You go start and tell me, I will help you. Because all the time he is always thinking about that act, that word of Bhagwan showed how he is always thinking about how to help these villagers. That the whole sense of patriotism plus seva, where you forget yourself and then spend your life bringing somebody else up.
Yes.
And Swami always stood for that, because he told, you start small scale industries. And the whole idea of bringing up our own country, Swami always stood for.
Yes.
It applies to every country, of course.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing, as Sir was pointing out. Patriotism is a means for giving up that swartha. It's a very obvious and a tool which is right in front of us, whichever country you belong to. Because it's easy to feel a sense of belonging to a country.
Belonging and even gratitude.
Gratitude,
Swami
right.
says.
Yeah.
That's what, the ability to think of the bigger society you belong to, I think eventually Swami would expect that patriotism goes to a sense of gratitude towards the Vyashti itself.
Correct.
The entire creation, and then you do every act. Which
Your
will
motherland
benefit.
is the paradise.
Right. Swami very often says that.
And
I think I'm really overwhelmed by the way Swami has connected patriotism with, societal service, with being in that state of Advaitanandam. So beautifully. And because towards the end of that clip, Swami is telling about what's the point in reading everything, and you can know the whole Bhagavad Gita from back to front, but if you're not practicing. So I think we'll come to the end of this program. Sir, thank you for being with us. And I think going back to that wonderful William Wordsworth, it was beautiful to listen to that. And I think it's so insightful for all of us, even though we've been students, we've been here for so many years. You could have spent 15 years with Swami, but still you would have missed so much. That is how much Swami has given in the sense of explanations and knowledge and, practical knowledge. He's proved and lived through these messages. We've been hearing them as discourses, but I think we've all seen him teaching these messages by living through them. And that is the joy we've all had. And thank you for sharing some of this.
I should thank you. I should thank Bhagwan actually for this wonderful privilege that I have been enjoying since last week and this week again. And I really look forward to more such weeks. Jai Sairam. Really.
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir. Whenever you're here, we'd love to have you on this program.
Thank you so much.
So, dear listeners, this is the end of this week's program, Shravanam Mananam Nididhyasanam. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for listening to us. If you have any feedback, as always, you can write to listener@radiosai.org. We'll keenly look forward to your responses. Till we meet you next week, this is Prem from Team Radio Sai signing off with Sai Prakash and Sonam Sir. Thank you. Jai Sai Ram.
Sai Ram. You just heard an episode of our radio series, Shravanam Mananam Nididhyasanam, that is, listen, reflect and absorb. This is a segment hosted live on Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. by Radio Sai's Sai Prakash and Prem, only on Asia stream of Radio Sai Global Harmony. In today's episode, which was first broadcast live on 29th May 2014, Mr. Sunam Gamtso, an alumnus of Bhagwan's University, participated as a guest. The discourses undertaken for study in this program are from the series of discourses delivered as part of the summer course in Indian Culture and Spirituality, 1990. The clips played in this episode were from the discourse delivered on 1st June 1990. To listen to the next part of this program, tune in same time, same day next week. Please do write to us and let us know what you think about this program by writing to listener@radiosai.org. Thank you and a loving Sai Ram from Prashanthi Nilayam.